Okay, President Doyle, we're ready whenever you are.
President Doyle speaking, bringing back to order the pharmacy meeting on June 13th, 2024. It is currently 2:49 p.m. We will now review and discuss a petition to amend rules received by the Oregon State Pharmacy Association, beginning with Staff Member Davis.
Okay, Staff Member Davis. For those on the phone, this is mailing E as an elephant. So on April 30th, 2024, the board received a petition from the Oregon State Pharmacy Association to amend 5 rules in OAR 855139. Those rules are -0050, -100, -200, -210, and -215. In 2021, Senate Bill 629 required the board to write rules to permit telepharmacies. The board started conducting reviews of proposed rules for what we termed remote dispensing site pharmacies in August of 2021 and ended up adopting permanent rules in December of 2021. Then in 2022, House Bill 4034 amended the law by prohibiting the board from establishing standards for telepharmacy that were stricter than standards for in-person delivery of pharmacy services. So shortly thereafter, in April 22, the board started their review of proposed revisions to the rules to bring the rules into compliance with the new law, and they adopted temporary rules at that board meeting. The permanent rules went through rulemaking, and the permanent rules were adopted in June of 2022. There was a further amendment that was discovered that needed to be made, so then that was motioned to be sent to rulemaking. There was a rulemaking hearing in December 2022 was when the board adopted the permanent rule. So OSPA has requested a review of multiple of the rules, including allowing interns to work at remote dispensing site pharmacies, removing the requirement to record each person entering the pharmacy area, removing the 120-mile limit for the supervising pharmacy location, removing the requirement to record all patient interactions, and removing the requirement for the pharmacist to accept refusal of counseling. I didn't mean pharmacists for the I guess for the pharmacist to accept refusal. OSPA proposes that these changes would increase opportunities for interns, align with the legislative intent of 2022 House Bill 4034, and improve access to pharmacy services, especially in remote areas. So to comply with the provisions of the petition rule, which is OAR 137-0001-0070, the board has invited public comment on this request. And then the board must, within 90 days of the request that was received, review the public comments and either deny the request in writing or initiate rulemaking. I'm going to hand it over to AAG Bertoni to talk more about the petition process.
AAG Bertoni. So a petition is a somewhat unusual way to begin rulemaking. Agencies typically begin rulemaking in the way you're all very familiar with, in terms of asking staff to develop concepts and working through the rule language in detail yourselves. A petition under the Administrative Procedure Act invites an up-down vote on the content of the petition. It invites the board to either grant it or start the rulemaking process. So as if you had already done all of the work that you do as a group collaboratively looking at rulemaking, it's as if that work had already been completed and you're now putting it out to notice and comments for permanent rulemaking. So it's a slightly expedited process. There are some considerations in thinking about whether or not to do that. One of them is, and I was struck by the inclusion of the interns in the RDSPs. One of the things to consider is whether or not the rules that are presented or in the petition are consistent with your statutory authority. And RDSPs are created under ORS 689-700, which specifically says that the remote site is staffed by a pharmacy tech. The legislature didn't make any reference to pharmacy interns. And I was recently reminded that there was another instance of statute, I think with regard to pseudoephedrine, where the legislature wrote text but didn't write interns. This may be another place where that's a similar issue. But the board, of course, is limited to what the legislature has authorized it to do. So the board is limited to allowing RDSPs to be run by techs. Now, there may be very sound policy reasons for interns to run them. I'm sort of removed from the practice of pharmacy myself. I don't know if that's a good policy or not. But the board can't implement it in response to the rulemaking petition any more than the board could implement it in response to its own initiative in rulemaking. So that's a consideration for the board to think about whether to grant or deny the rulemaking petition. In addition, as the petition identifies, and I think one of the commenters identifies, there's a lot of other rules actually in play here. So the petition asks the board to review all of the rules. I'm just reading from the petition, review all of the rules for RDSPs in chapter 855, division 139. That language appears a couple times in the cover letter to the petition, and there's a list of other rules that the petitioners believe are implicated. I would trust their judgment. If they think those rules are implicated, they probably are. But they've only actually given you language in the petition for 5 of the rules. So you would have, if you grant the petition, you're going to have this rulemaking process where you started amending 5 of the rules, but the other related rules are not being amended at the same time or in a synchronized way. As a consideration for the board about whether you grant or deny the petition. So you could imagine if you start pulling some of the threads one direction and the other threads aren't moving at the same speed to compare the plot. Right, so that's a consideration for the board about whether to grant or deny the petition. And I observed that the board has agrees at least with one of the policy recommendations from in the petition, in that the board earlier today voted to get rid of the mileage requirement, the 120-mile requirement for RDSPs. So this is not to say that any of the, I'm not taking a position, it's not my role to take a position on any of the policy matters, but it appears that at least some of the policy matters expressed here are ones the board is favorably disposed. But I do take note that you would have a difficulty, I think, in moving forward in a rulemaking where you have lack of statutory authority to move the interns to and have interns working at RDSPs. So those are the moving pieces I see. The board needs to decide, do you want to grant this petition and then start the rulemaking process within 90 days, or do you want to deny it? Denying it, of course, still leaves you the opportunity to instruct staff to move forward on the other policy issues that are of interest here, or to ask the executive director to see about working with the governor's office for a legislative concept to allow interns to be at RDSPs or to modify 689.7. Those are the sort of main pieces of this analysis, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Board Member Doyle, thank you for the information. We'll now open the floor for a round robin for comments that you have on this or questions for Councilor Bertoni. We'll begin with Board Member DeBarmore.
Board Member DeBarmore, thank you. I appreciate that summary. That was helpful. Unfortunate understanding the intent of why they put the request forward. But they're only allowed to do what we do. If it goes into, if we say yes, going to rulemaking, I just want to make sure I understand. Other pieces reviewed, and the intern piece we just can't change. Can't add interns to the
AG Bertoni. So the petition needs an up or down vote. It needs a grant or deny, and the petition includes a variety of all 5 rules are listed. So you would be advancing to rulemaking a petition, a rulemaking initiative that you lack statutory authority to do with respect to at least 2 of the rules where interns are added into the rule. So I don't know what it would mean for an agency to do that, but I could see that getting complicated very quickly. Another option would be to identify the 5 things that are listed here. This morning, you addressed one of those four rules already, right? So there's only 4 rules that are in play for the ones that are presented to you. 2 of them, one of them you can't make the change that's proposed because you don't have authority. One of them, and I'm looking in particular at the proposed edits to the outlet supervision rule, that's 855.139.0210, that has some changes in it that you could not make, adding the Oregon licensed interns, for example, because the statute doesn't allow it. It has a lot of other deletions. know if the board has looked at what the policy implications of that are. I also observed that the highlighted language, that audio and visual telepharmacy communications, that seems to combine definitions from two different rules that a board already has. So if the board advanced that rulemaking, the board would at least want to understand what it was trying to accomplish. You have a definitions rule that's specific to the 139. And you have general definitions in your 855, 006, 0005 rule. Those are both implicated in here. That would also take some sorting out.
Member DeBarmore, any further questions or comments? Board Member Hall?
Member Hall. Well, I would like to go down the avenue of trying to ask to get the interns added in the future, however that looks. What I'm understanding, we have to take this all as one package, and so I would have to say no.
Board Member Beeman?
Member Beeman, I too would like to see how we can go down the path to amend the statute or have that done. But it does sound like if it's a yes or no as a whole, I guess I have to say no, but would like to reexamine it in light of the petition and of the feedback. So that we can evaluate it without the fiction of being all yes or all no, because of the way that diversity being presented.
Board Member Doyle, I don't have any questions. Appreciate the council's interpretation and advice. And I think that there will be other good faith efforts that will be able to make to meet the intent. Board Member Chin.
Member Chin appreciates council's comments. I would like to see legislative concept about including interns for RDSP, and actually before looking at that single legislative concept, looking at other opportunities for interns under the direct supervision and control of the pharmacist who makes the decision about what an intern will cannot do. But in terms of the up or down, this is a down vote.
Member Joyce.
Board Member Joyce, yeah, obviously I support in turn at our DSP site. That would be a great learning opportunity for that intern to work at that site. So however, understanding that pushing this forward would cause a legislative mess. I don't want to do that. So this would have to be a no vote for me, and I definitely want to address the intern as part of the RDSPs going forward.
Board Member Patel.
Member Patel. To be honest with you, it's concerning for me that we only have one remote dispensing site, like just one. What that tell me, we might have to revisit the rules. We have to look at it, how can we remove the barrier and why there's only one site. And I know I personally look at it and some of the things were concerning and feel like, yeah, we have to update those RDPS rules. We have to make those changes so we can have more remote dispensing site in Oregon. That was just the one. Today morning we discussed about removing the mileage limit. That's just the one. There are so many other things we kind of have to revisit and we have to fix it. So I would say we should up the petition and we might want to review those rules if we can make any change and increase the remote dispensing site, increase the access to pharmacy. Thank you.
Member Hemmings?
And it's nothing to add.
Board Member Doyle, please note that, Board Member Jennifer Hall departed the meeting at 3:04 p.m. Are there any other questions for, Staff Member Davis or, Council Bertoni? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there a motion to move to deny the petition filed by OSPA on April 30th, 2024?
By Board Member Chin.
Board Member Joyce? We'll now call roll. And again, an affirmative vote is to deny the petition filed by OSPA on April 30th, 2024. Board Member Doyle, yes. Board Vice President Chin,
Yes.
Member Beeman,
Yes.
Board Member DeBarmore, Member Hall is absent, Board Member Hemmons,
Staying.
Member Joyce. Yes. Member Patel.
Opposed.
Motion passes with, Board Member Hemmons abstaining and Board Member Patel opposed. Now have an opportunity to, discuss further, those good faith efforts that were brought forward, by OSPA, in a, process and ability that, we potentially have. That we have, with regard to the issues that were brought up. And now I'll, turn it back over to, Staff Member Davis, unless I'm corrected, to begin some discussion with some SBARs, situation, background, assessment, and recommendations that were produced by board staff. This is package E1 Echo 1.
Staff Member Davis. So also want to bring to topic of consideration. So we just did the policy discussion ranking exercise. This is now a new policy topic that was not considered during that exercise. And so I can either facilitate the discussion first, and then we can have you each vote on to where you would want this to be brought back. Like, what is your priority? Because I need to know that in order to bring it back. I did hear from the comments, it sounds like you do want a review of these rules, just this petition particularly had to be denied. So I need to know where this falls on the scheme of things. So I don't know, do you want to re-rank first? Because we'll just do a number vote and then average it to see where it goes, or do you want to do the discussions first?
I will ask the opinions of the, or recommendations of the board members in which, process they would like to go. Board Member Doyle, I would like to talk about the SBARs first and then rank thereafter. What would you like to do first, Board Vice President Jin?
SBARs first, please.
Board Member Bean,
As far as first,
Member DeBarmore,
agree.
Board Member Hemmons,
No preference.
Member Joyce, as far as first, Member Patel. So I'll turn it back to you, to Staff Member Davis to take us through the SBARs, and then upon conclusion, we can potentially rank them as a group because they're related. Probably that would be a better idea as opposed to rank them
Correct.
as individual SBARs where each SBAR would go into the matrix.
Staff Member Davis, yes, that is what I was hoping could be accomplished. So I already kind of verbally went over the first page of the SBAR, which was like the general, was kind of what I used for my lead-in, kind of giving you some background and history on where this started, where it's been, and kind of possibly where we're headed. So we'll scroll to the next page, which is the amendment for OAR 855-139-0050. I think you just received, well, it has all the rules that are involved in this first page, just for your reference. It was really, and for the public, so you didn't have to go searching and digging around to find each rule. So there's 18 pages of every rule that is mentioned in the petitions.
So do you want to be
Just scroll down. I want to be on
19 kind of? Okay.
Yeah, we'll go to the next.
Yeah.
So we'll just reference the rule we need to reference.
It's not 19.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thanks.
As you can see, there's a lot of rules implicated for this discussion. So the first petition to amend was the 1390050.2, which was about interns. I think AAG Bertoni has already discussed this. I'm not sure if there needs to be further discussion, or maybe, I don't know, Board President Doyle, if you want to get feedback specifically on if the board would like to request a concept to be moved forward to change the statute, specific to this rule.
Board Member Doyle, I think that is appropriate. So basically seeking board guidance with if most members of the board are in agreement, then that will be direction for the executive director to seek a statutory change. We will begin with Board Member Beeman.
And I would like to seek a statutory change.
Board Member Doyle, I would like to investigate that. Board Member Chin,
Same.
for Joyce,
Sweet.
Member Patel,
I abstain.
Member Hemmons,
Board Member Emmons, I don't really understand what the implications would be, so I'm gonna abstain.
I'll wait for a moment. Board Member Hemmons had the question about implications of moving forward with this. And from an executive director or from an AAG standpoint, could you elucidate what implications or effect this would be in a governance process?
AG Bertoni, Executive Director Fox asked me to take this one. If I understand the question correctly, it's like, what would be the implications of a legislative concept? Did I miss the discussion?
So, Member Hemmons, I don't understand what they terms. That's not a question for you.
Okay.
Of a clinical question.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want an answer. I'm just saying because I don't know what the ramifications would be. Patients would be. Rather abstain that I need to know what I'm voting for.
Understood.
Board Member Doyle, that application of inclusion of interns in this would expand the number and types of licensees that could be working at an RDSP. Instead of just a pharmacy technician, it could also be a pharmacy intern. And right now, we don't have the statutory authority to do that. First, we would potentially be seeking the statutory authority change. And then potentially after that process, we would have to determine what rules would be necessary to ensure that statutory change was effectuated in an operation, operationalize that. I hope. Member DeBarmore,
The farmer, I agree.
so of the board members, present, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, we had 4 board members in favor and 2 abstaining for moving this idea of a statutory change to include interns. So is that sufficient for you, Executive Director Fox, Staff Member Davis?
it is sufficient, and I would just inform the board where we are in the budget development process as it relates to LCs, legislative concepts. This year is different than in previous years, or budget cycles rather. The governor has requested that agencies provide legislative concepts much earlier, and those concepts were turned in the first quarter of this year, and so we're past that deadline for agencies to supply any LCs to the governor's office and CFO for review. Those LCs that have already been provided, which at the last board meeting, you've given me direction to, as it relates to House Bill 4002, ORS 689, and ORS 475, to continue our due diligence on those pieces of legislation and develop a LC, which we put forth. Those LCs will be back to agencies this fall, so I won't receive it until October. I won't know whether those LCs will have the green light from the governor until that point. But I hear the direction of the board, and I would do as directed and provide that information to the governor's office. Whether that was forwarded or not, I cannot tell you in certainty that it will, but I will do my best.
Member Beaman?
Board Member Beaman, is there another pathway for this to get there outside of us that we might discuss in this open session that would provide a starting point for another party that or all the due date was for everybody, not just within the.
Every agency within the enterprise, we all had to provide LCs, legislative concepts, and policy packages put forth within, because once we kicked off budget cycle in March, all that information had to be due sooner this year.
Board Member, Councilperson Tony?
Hey, Chief Tony, but just to clarify, Executive Director Fox's remarks are about what the state agencies reporting to the governor can do. As to timing by other entities, that's outside the boards, non-state actors have their own authority and to act.
Member Chin?
Member Chin was just going to, not so eloquently state that other actors who aren't in state agencies are able in whatever they're allowed to do for making legislative concepts and petitioning our legislative members. I'm free to do.
Board Member Doyle, and as we have discovered the intricacies and intertwining of many of these rules across this area that we've been talking about for the last hour or so, my personal recommendation is that entities that would be, or actors that would be bringing such forth a change to statute would work closely with board staff to do some preemptive work to have a workable solution before it's enacted on by legislation within a silo, so to speak.
And I would just, in further response to Board Member Beaman, your question, hypothetically, those non-state actors, the legislature had ledge days. The next ledge days is going to be September. All legislators are working on packages for the 2025 long session. So there's opportunities outside of what we could do internally and in the state. But yes, I would hope that those non-actors would work with agency staff. That way we can make sure that the intent of the legislation is where we will be able to meet that, and the board will have the authority to enforce whatever will come later.
Thank you, just board member, thank you. And I echo board member Doyle and Executive Director Fox, and that I hope that be some work together to avoid delays like this for patients and access with what the intent is versus what the words that end up on the page are.
Are there any further comments with the regard to the SBAR petition to amend OAR 855-139-0050, para 2. Hearing and seeing none, I'll turn it back over to Staff Member Davis.
Staff Member Davis, the next rule is 855-139-0100, paren 4. The current rule states that a record must be maintained with the name and license number of each person entering the pharmacy area of the RDSP. The board discussed these rules with its initial rulemaking back for Senate Bill, whatever did I say, 629 in 2021. It did not revisit this rule when 2022 House Bill 4034. We did undergo a process to make sure that our rules were in compliance with the new law, but the rule, we already have a rule that says we think essentially the same thing and would cover the concerns. So in OAR 855-139-0100, paren 5 says no one may be in the prescription area of the RDSP unless authorized in real time by an Oregon licensed pharmacist who is supervising the RDSP and from the RDSP affiliated pharmacy. So already requiring authorization in real time, which is going to capture who is coming and going. So having an additional requirement in paren 4 to have a record with a name and license number is additional. So the board here, we wanted you to discuss if the rule in paren 5 is sufficient to meet the board's intent for ensuring security and supervision, direction, and control of the pharmacy technician that's located in the pharmacy. Back to you, Board President Doyle.
I was missing.
I'm having trouble orienting my my view, which I need to what this is. So it's page 20.
Yeah, Staff Member Milton, this should be page 20 in Teams, if you're viewing it in Teams. Yes.
Board Member Doyle, I'm having not sure that I understand the question. Could you please repeat the thing that we have and what is that thing that we as the board are determining is already appropriate or not?
So OAR 855-139-0100, paren 5 states that no one may be in the prescription area of the RDSP unless authorized in real time by an Oregon licensed pharmacist who's supervising the RDSP and from the RDSP affiliated pharmacy. So the board's to discuss if that rule is sufficient to meet the board's intent of ensuring security and supervision, direction, or control of the pharmacy. So in a traditional pharmacy, if someone comes to walk in your pharmacy, right, the pharmacist is there and they're like, yep, okay, come in. Nope, you can't come in, whoever it is. So this rule essentially does that same thing for an RDSP. So the question is, do we really need a rule in paren 4, which is the petition? They wanted to eliminate this rule. Do we really need a rule that says a record must be maintained of the name and license number of the person, creating like additional documentation? Because that's not required in a traditional pharmacy. A lot of pharmacies do this as a best practice, but we believe that like paren 5 is meeting the same security requirement as we have in a traditional pharmacy, and that paren 4 may not be needed as the petitioner has requested.
I appreciate that explanation. We begin conversation with Board Member Chin to determine if number para 4 in the petitioner's proposal could be stricken down because we already have the other rule in place.
Member Chin agrees with striking para 4.
Member Joyce?
Board Member Lewis, yeah, so if it's the rule in a physical pharmacy as opposed to the RDSP, need to have this additional language. You don't need it.
Member Patel,
Remember Patel, yes, write down that one, number 4.
Member Hemmons.
Remember Hemmons, are we saying that it's redundant?
Yes, we are, or that is what we believe might be the case, and we're asking board members to confirm if they agree that it is redundant.
See the redundancy?
Number 5 is listed under A. Because 5 already exists, then number 4, the actual requirement to maintain a record, that documentation piece is not necessary because, as staff member Davis said, many regular pharmacies don't have to do that. Correct, staff member Davis?
Yeah, and 689-700 in the statute, when it was revised in 2022, requires the board not to enact rules that are more strict than the requirement for a traditional pharmacy. This could potentially be, per 4, be a more strict requirement than a traditional pharmacy that we did not discover when we were doing the initial revision of the rules as 2022 House Bill 4034 required us to do.
Remember Hemmons, that explanation makes more redundant, very different. One, you're saying no one is required, the other one, you're saying keep a record of. But your explanation just now makes.
Member DeBarmore,
Board member Department, I agree, it's right.
member Beaman,
I agree, it's right.
member Doyle, it seems, I agree, and it seems as we have consensus. Staff member Davis.
All right, staff member Davis, the next rule that was in line was OAR 858. I hit my mute button, sorry. 855-139-0200 per 2. This the board discussed earlier and already motioned on. I'm gonna just give it back to you, President Doyle, to see if there's any further discussion, but my understanding is that the requirement, right, for the mileage has been eliminated already by motion earlier in the meeting and doesn't need to be readdressed at this time.
Board member Doyle speaking. Are there any further comments or concerns with information that's presented in the SBAR that you don't think were addressed in the conversation earlier today? Seeing none, we will move on to the next SBAR, please.
The next rule is OAR 855, excuse me, 139-0210 paren 1. The current rule states that RDSP and its RDSP affiliated pharmacy must, paren 1, ensure prescription drugs are only dispensed at the RDSP if an organ licensed pharmacist is supervising the certified organ pharmacy technician or pharmacy technician and the surveillance system is fully operational. The background on this is a little more lengthy, and some of you were not on the board when this happened, so I tried to go back to kind of summarize and explain. So in December of 2021, the board had a policy discussion related to this rule because they had originally seen like a draft in August, and then they'd send it to rulemaking, and it went through rulemaking, and then during that board meeting, we had noticed the rule to say, and the telepharmacy system is fully operational. So you see what you adopted was surveillance system, but we had sent through rulemaking telepharmacy system. And at the time, we explained a telepharmacy system does not do surveillance. Surveillance replicates the in-person supervision of a technician. Audio and video allows you to be remote, but still able to supervise at the same level as in person. A technician could be in the pharmacy and do inventory tasks if the telepharmacy system wasn't working, but they could not be working in the pharmacy if the surveillance system was not working. And this rule is around, I believe security is the name of the rule. So based on this information, agency staff suggested to the board to change the rule as noticed from telepharmacy system to surveillance system. But That was substantive and it's not something that you could do during the board meeting and then adopt. So, according to the minutes and my recollection of the conversation as well, the board discussed the need to update it. You discussed the risk of removing the line completely and just not adopting that portion of the rule at all, which is what you actually decided to do. At the time, board staff had advised that it was unlikely that there'd be a remote dispensing pharmacy operating before the rule could be amended during the rulemaking process in early 2022. So you voiced support for removing that particular line from the rule. You adopted the rest of the rule. And then the next board meeting, we brought back to you the revised language so that it could go through rulemaking because it was a substantive change. So in February 2022, you then sent it to rulemaking. In June of 2022, you adopted the new rule with the language for using the surveillance system being fully operational, not the telepharmacy system. So for the assessment, the petitioner had asked to add organ license intern. We've already discussed that, so I'm not going to further discuss that. But then they also had said adding audio and visual telepharmacy communication and continuous video, which this just runs into a little bit of an issue with our definitions. We already have adopted definitions for an audio visual communication system. And then this would not be using our same terminology and thus would not invoke the same definitions. And then a telepharmacy system is a second type of system and a surveillance system is a third type of system. I highlighted them in color so that you could see where it flows as we're talking about this. So in trying to merge what the petitioner was wanting and then what would mesh with our current definitions, I proposed what's on the next page. I'm sorry that cut to the next page, but ensure prescription drugs are dispensed at the RDSP and an organ licensed pharmacist is supervising the super certified organ pharmacy technician or pharmacy technician, audio visual communication system, telepharmacy system, and surveillance system is fully operational. If you go back up to the petitioner's request, they had asked for the audio and visual communication to be there. They had asked for the telepharmacy to be there. And they'd asked for continuous video, which if you look at the definition of surveillance system, that is the system of video cameras, monitors, and other equipment used for surveillance. So it appears potentially the petitioner is asking for all three of these systems to have to be fully working in order for the licensee to be in the pharmacy. However, based on previous board discussion that the rule had started as telepharmacy system, moved to surveillance system, I need feedback from the board as to what systems you think need to be operational and working. So how can a pharmacist at the RDSP affiliated pharmacy supervise, direct, and control a technician located at an RDSP as required by our statute in 689486? So what systems need to be operational to facilitate this requirement? Is it the audiovisual system? Is it the telepharmacy system? Is it the surveillance system? All of the above, some of the above, none of the above. I hand it back to you, Board President Doyle.
President Doyle, thank you. We begin conversation with answering that question with our tech giant or advocate, board member Joyce.
Board Member Joy, so looking at each definition, I mean, they're distinctly different. Of course, as we discussed earlier, the pharmacist will generally verify if they are, I mean, it should not verify. You should use your professional judgment when verifying medications. We need all three of these systems in place. I mean, they are each individually different. This is a kind of a tough question of semantics and definition. Looking at all three, continuous, accessible two-way, audiovisual link. I mean, they all overlap. I don't know. Operational. Well, for now, I'll say all three. But they do overlap. Looks like.
Member Patel?
Remember Patel, yeah, it is overlap, and do we really need all the three working to verify the prescription? I mean, or dispense the prescription? To me, it should be or, like, if one of the system is working, I think still you can dispense this, whether it is audio visual. See, you have audio, you have visual. Telepharmacy, sure, you can still perform your work. If the telepharmacy and the audio visual down, and if you have surveillance system, you done your DUR, technician doing the product verification, image is recorded and everything, you have surveillance, then I don't see I don't see any reason why can't you dispense the medication. So for me, it should be or audio visual or telepharmacy or surveillance. And then you can still perform your task.
Board Member Doyle, please note that board member Hemmings left at approximately 3:34. Board member, DeBarmore,
Board member Barmore. Last meeting. Put it all out because. And my partner in crime, Miss Peppermint, is probably gonna turn over right now, so.
She's on the call.
She is on the phone.
She was. Right there.
I would say, let's just get a little crazy and say outlets must have downtime procedures and that are clear. And so staff know what to do should any of the systems be down. And because there is so much that happens in pharmacy, so much. We need to have audio, video, or so many things that happen. We're trying to capture all the things in this little bitty box. I would say outlets need to have clear downtime procedures. Should systems not be working on what functions can and cannot occur. So it is clear to a technician if audio-visual communication system is down, they cannot do X, Y, and Z because a pharmacist who's the one that's in charge and who's on the hook for this can't do their job. If the video camera is down, is it that the person can't do? I don't love having to have all of these things anyway. Understand. But let's give some latitude in allowing a pharmacist to determine the tasks so that they can adequately supervise certain elements of technology in place.
Member Beaman.
Member Beeman, I do like the concept and the language that board member DeBarmore just said. I think that it brings up not just what we have under these definitions now, but whatever that can evolve into technologically without impeding that technology in terms of a patient care option if it doesn't fit into one of these three definite categorical definitions. So I like that. I like that approach better than being as specific and as what's currently there and what's been proposed both on the petition and the way it was worked by staff.
Board Member Doyle, I'm hoping Staff Member Davis can help me with, for other board members, when we worked with some of these definitions earlier today, can you remind me how we adjusted or we talk about telepharmacy systems in 120-mile aspect?
Staff Member Davis, yeah, we had discussed adding a prohibited practice for the pharmacist to, gosh, I can't remember the exact wording, something about dispensing a prescription when the telepharmacy system was down, maybe Staff Member B or Board Member Beeman has.
I believe it was on, because I just reviewed that prior, it was on verification.
Yeah,
And so
it was about the audio being down.
it's about
Or-
like, if the audio or visual is down, they can't verify, but then discussion was around, you can still verify if you have video but no audio.
This board member Chin, what we did was left it up to the pharmacist professional judgment on how and if they could verify, and if they could not verify, then they could not dispense.
Member Doyle, was that 1390600?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
that's the number.
Well, yeah, there was not a motion
Right.
to move that forward. And so I'm trying to reconcile that piece of information with the will of the board to see how that is aligned or not with the question that is being posed here. And we the majority was in agreement to not mandate that the telepharmacy system was fully operational. We hope that the pharmacists would do that as a best practice, if you will, but not have a rule around it, is my remembrance. And in thinking that that was board consensus not to include, it appears to me that board member DeBarmore's suggestion of speaking to downtimes as opposed to these must be fully operational would be more in line with that approach that we made earlier today. Member Chin?
Board member Chin fully supports the downtime but I would, if we're gonna have, I think that in order to protect, I would say it's a must. That we're not gonna have all this stuff in the rule, like we must have a detailed downtime procedure, right? And I think having that as a must. Direction to the professional pharmacist on how to do that. And I am perfectly comfortable with that. And I would suggest in your downtime procedures that you practice those every once in a while, because we have to do downtime procedures, and if we don't know what stuff is, we don't know, every staff changes all the time, that there be some set pins on doing that.
Staff Member Davis, is there you see an issue with the feedback that we've provided, that you think that potential future rule changes could not be made, or I'm just wondering if there's a more specific need that you're identifying that need further comment on.
Senator Davis, not at this time. We're just gathering notes from your discussion, and then we'll bring back a rule once you tell us what priority to bring it back with.
Are there any other comments with regard to the petition to amend OAR 855-139-0210, para 1?
Board Member Joyce, just real quick, I do like the option for the or and then having downtime procedures.
Member Beeman?
Member Beeman, going up. I just wanna recapture that we can. I guess, so the way this is coming back to us via this process. Will we still be able to, just because this was part of the petition, call out if a discrepancy is found in other parts of the rule to change that?
So AAG Bertoni, at this point, yes, because we're past the petition was denied. So now you're just stealing their good ideas.
Okay.
And you can deal with all of the other moving pieces as you would in any regular moving proceeding.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we're not losing sight of the big picture with some of the things. Thank you.
Staff Member Davis, turn the floor back to you.
Give me just a moment. We're going to move on to OAR 855-139-0210, paren 2 through 5. I'm not going to read this out for you. There's a side-by-side comparison so you can kind of see. I've highlighted in yellow, like where it talks about what percentage of patient interactions had to be observed or reviewed. I've highlighted in green how quickly that a review had to happen. I've highlighted in blue how quickly the documentation of the review had to happen. Obviously, the petitioner wants to strike that language. In addition, it's important to look at paren 2. They want to strike the last sentence about all patients' interactions must be recorded, reviewed, and stored. So scrolling down, you'll see as I presented, and then in purple, it's about reporting any violation of the rules to the affiliated pharmacy, not to the board, but to the affiliated pharmacy within 24 hours. Because there's a lot of board discussion and there's a lot of similar, there's percentages and there's hours. So that's why I did the color coding to try to help direct what you had previously discussed. For those of you that were on the board, you may recall you had a lot of long conversations and debate about these numbers and rules. So scrolling down, just looking at the assessment. So previous board discussion in October 2021, you talked about in a traditional pharmacy, a pharmacist would be able to overhear most of the conversations that are occurring and be able to intervene in real time as necessary. And in RDSP, the pharmacist is not present and would likely not be able to intervene in real time. And so we had requested input from the board on the requirement for the supervising pharmacist to review the interactions and report discovery of a violation within 24 hours of occurrence. The board talked about how that time limit could be restrictive and unreasonable. The board discussed how it could be more reasonable to change the hours requirements to reporting within 24 hours of discovery of violation rather than 24 hours from the actual occurrence. The board discussed the challenges of reviewing a minimum of 25%, because that's where this rule started, of the interactions within 24 hours. And you talked a lot about that the expectation was crafted with patient safety in mind. You discussed using a different metric, different percentage. We discussed whether the review was necessary with the technology that's available for real-time supervision. You discussed lowering the percentage, but landed at that time at the 25% requirement. You came to consensus, both support to review the interactions within 48 hours, leaving it at 25% of the interactions. And you voiced support for requiring the supervising pharmacist to report any violation to their affiliated pharmacy within 24 hours of discovery. You sent it to rulemaking. And then you got a lot of comments about that 25%. And so the board discussed with our AAG that you could lower the requirement without sending it back through rulemaking, because it was reasonable to expect that it could be lower, but if you had tried to increase the number, then it would have had to go back out for rulemaking. So during that discussion from the rulemaking hearing, You voiced support for drafting a motion to change the percentage to 10% and added the word observe because you wanted to make sure it was clear to people, like you don't have to go back and review it. You could review these in real time if you're on the audio-visual communication system or whatever you're using. So you sectioned this out and you voted for each subsection separately because you had made some amendments and different changes. So I put the actual votes on each one in here for so that you could be aware. So the assessment, obviously, or adding organ license intern in paren 2. We're not going to go there. You need to scroll further down. And then the request for removing all patient interactions must be recorded, reviewed, and stored. We're going to kind of discuss in conjunction with paren 3. So removing 3A, B, and C, which is what requires the supervising pharmacist and RDSP to review at least 10% of patient or technician interactions with a patient within 48 hours and document the review within 24 hours. The main requirement is that in our statutes, ORS 689-486, pharmacists are required to supervise, direct, and control pharmacy technicians at all times. And by amending paren D to remove to the affiliated pharmacy within 24 hours of discovery, that's kind of a little bit of a different issue. In ORS 689-455, the pharmacist or technician must report any suspected violation to the board. And then our rule in 855-104-0010 specifies that report be made to the board within 10 days. Something to think about with paren 3. Paren 4, if you remove paren 4, which is requiring the outlet to comply with the pharmacist's determination of how much they need to review to ensure patient safety and employ adequate staff for the completion of the 48 hours. If you delete that rule, the percentages and the hours, then paren 4 is no longer necessary. If you retain it to be consistent with other rules related to safe pharmacy practitioners, there should be some retaining, that this rule should be retained because it is also included in Division 41 so that pharmacists, that the outlets are required to employ enough staff for the pharmacists to safely supervise, direct, and control their employees. In paren 5, removing ensure telephone audio is recorded, reviewed, and stored for all patient interactions is completed by the technician. If you delete 3A and B and 2, then paren 5 is no longer necessary. You don't have the requirement, you don't have to keep this. If 2, 3A, and B are amended, then paren 5 would also need to be amended. The petitioner brought up related to privacy concerns about ORS 165540 requires consent to be given by at least one participant. RDSPs can mitigate concerns about recordings by using signs and greetings that clearly state that conversations are being recorded. Some pharmacies report phone conversations as common practice, as some of your mail order and specialty pharmacies. Just thoughts for consideration. So then for board discussion, because this one's kind of a beast, I couldn't separate it out because they're all very intertwined. And a lot of it's 3A, B, and C, right? That's the crux of it. And whatever you decide with that will then affect 2, 4, and 5. So in the RDSP setting, how does a pharmacist provide supervision, direction, and control of a pharmacy technician as required by our statutes at all times? Is it through surveillance, audiovisual, or telepharmacy systems? Is documentation needed? And second question, in the RDSP setting, how does the supervising pharmacist ensure there's timely communication with the outlet? It is important to note that there is not a requirement in ORS 689 or OAR 855 that requires the pharmacist in a traditional pharmacy to report a potential violation to their outlet. The only requirement is that they must report to the board within 10 days. And I already went over the statutes and rules that were required for that. So it's a lot. I'll hand that back to Board President Doyle to discuss.
Member Doyle, thank you for the exhaustive review. I think you've been handed 2 bullet points for board discussion. Brian tackled the first bullet point first in a round robin. The RDSP setting, how does the pharmacist provide supervision, direction, and control at all times? And how is that accomplished? Member Patel?
I would just say through the telepharmacy system. That's what I would go with the first question. And is documentation needed? Well, to me, it's like, 5, 6 years ago, like we all see in the meeting room, we all like in person come in. Now it's like more and more like Zoom meeting, right? So for the RDSP remote dispensing side, like pharmacist is already supervising those technicians. Well, in traditional pharmacy, we don't record, we don't document. Why we have to record, document, reviewed, and all other thing, I think is unnecessary with remote dispensing sites. And to be honest with you, if I have any patient interaction about a week ago or month ago, even if I'm there as an in-person, I don't think so I'm going to remember. So I don't know why we have to document all those things just because it's remote dispensing site when you're already supervising, you already have those telepharmacy, you already have all those systems in place. So documentation is not needed. And I think we are only talking about the first portion right now, right?
First bullet point?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Try.
Yeah.
Board Member DeBarmore?
Board Member DeBarmore. I don't know if the opportunity or if you read a rule that NABP has did a significant overhaul on their rules with a similar intent as what OSPA had asked for. And the words that they chose, the words that they took out, are very much in line with this request and make a lot of sense. And it does allow for pharmacists to determine the appropriate mechanism for doing just that, supervising, directing, and control, and what technology would be required for the different activities that may occur during those times without finding what it must be and when it must be. So I would suggest looking at a little bit more broad the model rules. They're simple, they're straightforward, and it makes a whole lot of sense. It's easy to follow.
Member Bean?
Board Member Beeman, I agree with Board Member Farmer's comments regarding the model rules and when reading them at the same, definitely think what we have is reflecting on them many years later, more restrictive than the direction I would like to move in.
Board Member Doyle, Board Member DeBarmore, and Board Member agreed with Board Member DeBarmore. But for advocacy for using the model rules, you believe that the model rules allow the practice site to determine using a surveillance audiovisual telepharmacy and or a telepharmacy system.
Board member DeBar Morgan. So for example, supervising pharmacy of a remote dispensing site must maintain a video and audio communication system that provides for effective communication between a pharmacist and the remote dispensing site personnel and patients or caregivers. The system must facilitate adequate pharmacist supervision and allow the appropriate exchange of visual, verbal, and written communication for patient counseling and other matters involved in the lawful transaction or delivery of drugs. A remote dispensing site must use a pharmacy technology that confirms that the drug selected to fill the prescription is the same as indicated on the prescription label and prescription drug order. There's more words in that section, but just that simplified a lot of the other.
And Board Member Doyle, I'm also trying to do my due diligence to try and help make sure that your answer had also been satisfactory to staff's requests for clarification of what type of system was necessary. And so thanks for that clarification. Steve, I appreciate the language that you have read. There were some concerns that were raised for me in terms of adequate or other words like that. And there is, I think if a problem had occurred and then the board was required to investigate, as we've had conversations around this, it's oftentimes difficult for the board to adjudicate if something was correct at that time during that experience. And so because of the significant conversation that we've had in the past in developing these metrics, we thought that was the minimum criteria that was necessary for a new program. And we have had one RDSP. I don't know how well it's functioning. I don't know what the feedback is, or are they able to meet these metrics, et cetera. I'm in terms of providing supervision, direction, and control. I think that the documentation is still necessary. It appears that the telepharmacy system and audiovisual system are necessary, but in the previous conversation for the SBAR immediately to this, we were offering downtime procedures. And thinking that was an appropriate mechanism for allowing some leniencies. But, I think that we still need to name the systems that we expect as a board will offer safe patient management. We've gone, Board Member Chin.
Board Member Chin really appreciates Board Member DeBarmore's mention of the model rules, and I have not had an opportunity to delve into that in addition to all the other in addition to all the other stuff in my life. And so I would like to really look at model rules as a starting, I don't know if we can do it as a starting point, but but it, is a, instead of doing the S bar from here, model rules against what we have and figure out what makes more sense for Oregonians.
Member Joyce?
Board Member Joyce, I agree with the previous comments. Our rules that we came up with are more restrictive and, the questions came up like, how do you even monitor 25% or 10% of interactions? How do you monitor that? So that came up quite a bit in our discussions back then. As far as the specific bullet point we're talking about, how do pharmacists provide supervision, direction, and control? I quote, at all times. Obviously, you're going to need one of those systems to be working. As far as documentation, I mean, that when I see that, it's asking for additional documentation than what normally goes through a transaction or what normally goes through when a prescription is processed. To me, that's what I'm seeing there is documentation needed. I think documentation is captured in the software and the systems and the audiovisual portion, then a pharmacist can supervise to using professional judgment. I don't think us putting a metrics on how many interactions they capture has any, it doesn't seem to make sense. I mean, they're using the professional judgment. They're watching the technicians working in the RDSD. They're verifying the medications using telepharmacy systems. They're monitoring technician using audiovisual system surveillance. So I don't think additional documentation is needed. I definitely support what was previously stated about the model system. Thank you.
Board Member Doyle, the other question at hand is in the RDSP setting, how does the supervising pharmacist ensure there is timely communication with the outlet? And the subpoints below that. Any additional comments on that section, Board Member DeBarmore?
Board Member DeBarmore, I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, don't have that in anywhere else that a supervising pharmacist has to report to the outlet. The pharmacist working in a regular outlet. It'd be something that they do, and it would be risk of the outlet if they have pharmacists that weren't reporting things to them. I don't know that we should drive that to be done.
Member Beeman?
Remember Beeman in evaluating the language, it's so it's phrased so officially but in reality and in workflow, it's something that happens naturally, that's inherent in if non-pharmacist licensee finds a problem, or even a non-licensed personnel finds a problem, it goes to the pharmacist just immediately. Or that is soon as discovered. So I don't, and thinking back to when we first talked about this, I think that there was this, it was so unknown that we were, at least I was like afraid of all the potential things. And in seeing, especially like in the NABP guidance document where there's people weighing in from several states who may have more experience with this in their state. It just seems a little too restrictive. And I think the reporting to the board within 10 days would be adequate rather than, I think it's going to naturally be reported to the affiliate pharmacy via the interaction between the technician and pharmacist.
Board Member Doyle, it seems as if, because of the House bill mandating that RDSPs are not managed more stringently than regular pharmacies, it seems that reporting to the outlet is falls in that category and there should be eliminated. Board Member Chin.
Member Chin? When Board Member Beeman talked about how we looked at these rules when we didn't have a clue how an RDSP would be run, and I was afraid, I mean, as a public member, not having a clue, even less of a clue than you all did. It would really, so it was a huge help for me to go to whatever they called that, executive director Fox, that Walgreens thingy bob that we went to with all the robot-y things. That was so freaking cool. If there was a video of how this RDSP system works, and I could see, because I see this in the tech in a box doing tech work with all this camera stuff and video stuff on them. And is there a pharmacist just sitting here at the station watching this tech do all their stuff? How does this work that they're supervising and controlling in tech all the time? Because they're actually doing all of their work over here. When are they doing that work over there? I don't get how this works.
Dr. Barmore, how does it work in a real pharmacy when you have one pharmacist supervising 4, 5, 6 techs?
Oh, you have eyes and ears in, so I only know my little pharmacy that I go to. I don't know big pharmacy, but this little pharmacy that I go to, you can hear everybody talking, right? They're on a screen. It's so easy to ignore a screen. How is that being supervised? It's just that my thought process is, I don't know how it works. You're doing so much here. This screen can be easy. I don't know, when does a pharmacist interact? When does the pharmacist look at this, and this before it gets dispensed? I mean, is there ding? Oh, okay, gotta go over here. Ding, oh, gotta go over here. How does it work? That's what I don't know.
There's no additional comment.
Member Patel.
Member Patel, thank you for bringing up that NABP model rule. And I did review that, and that was my thought process when, there was the OSP event say like, hey, here is a petition to review all the rules. And I was thinking, let's accept the petition, then review all the rules and take that NABP model rule. And then let the licensee tell which one work, which one don't work. So instead of going one by one. But anyway, no, yes, those are really good NABP model rule for the remote dispensing site. I think ours is way too restrictive, and I'm not surprised we only have one remote dispensing site because of that. So.
Member Davis. One more SBAR to go through.
Yes, but before we move on, I just wanted to address a couple of points that were made. You said you hadn't heard or didn't think you had heard from the RDSP that's in operation. They did actually provide comment in their packet on that specific rule, what their thoughts were. So I just wanted to redirect you back to that. Board Member Chen, when we looked at these rules originally back in December 2021, as part of the mailing, we had a link. There was a beautiful website at the time that showed a lot of videos of this happening in various pharmacies. That site, that company got bought and that site is no longer up. So the link doesn't work, and I've been looking for it because I really wanted to like revisit, let everybody see it. So if I find it, or someone in this room maybe knows where their videos are of these pharmacies they're operating, we'll be happy to share that back with the board so you can look at it now, but the link is dead. So thank you. All right, one more. Last one, best one. All right, the next petition is OAR 855-139-0215, paren 2. This is a petition to amend our council, well, not our counseling rule, the provision about counseling within the RDSP rules. So it currently states utilize an organ licensed pharmacist and audiovisual communication system to provide counseling or accept the refusal of counseling from the patient or the patient's agent for each prescription being dispensed when counseling is required under OAR 855-115-0145, and when requested and document the interaction. The board discussed this back in 2021. They specifically discussed the counseling requirement and voice support for retaining the same requirements for counseling as outlined in our previous rule, which was 855-019-0230, prior to dispensing prescriptions from remote dispensing site pharmacy. Agency staff have already identified rules like this rule that require amending due to other recent rule changes. We changed a lot of rules back in March. I have an entire packet with tons of rules that need some updating and modification, but the question is like, what's the priority on this? So we have a rule package that we're drafting. This was one of the rules in there because we had identified that. But obviously revising this language as proposed by OSPA would reconcile the rule with the new current OAR 855-115, specifically paren 3 and 7. So this is a great segue to the next kind of conversation that we need to have to wrap up our discussions today, is assessing the priority of this amendment while considering other board priorities. So we can only do so many things at once, and what is the board's will for how quickly you see back a package on RDSP and making the modifications that were suggested today, and bringing back some language. I also failed to mention, was one of the things I wanted to mention earlier. When we wrote these rules originally, we did look at those model rules. You can see a lot of the similar language. So the fact that they've updated the model rules, maybe it's the time to take a fresh look and see what was there. But there wasn't a lot out there at the time. We were one of the early adopters of this. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and we'll be sure to take a look at that. So back to you, Board President Doyle, to if you want to discuss whether or not you should move forward with an amendment to this rule, just for that matter of business order, and then move into a discussion about where this should rank within the policy list.
Board Member Doyle, so in reference to the last SBAR that we just had reviewed, I think assessing the priority is, we were going to assess the priority of the package of all the SBARs together, as opposed to this one. Staff Member Davis, you're asking for any further board reflections on this particular SBAR itself?
Yes.
Yes. So we begin with Board Member Beeman.
I think the board member Beeman, I think in looking at what we're reading in media and the facts about
pharmacies closing left and right in Oregon. I would put this as a really high priority in order to allow companies or what's it, parent pharmacy, whatever, affiliated pharmacies to possibly start going down this path if they see it as a feasible option.
If I may interrupt, so the question at hand is, with regard to the changes. We're gonna go through the ranking, if you will, in just a moment, but is there any additional comments that you have with regard to the necessity of changing the language? By striving
The counseling.
yeah,
Yes, I want to do that to make it consistent with we put in place for pharmacies. Sorry, misunderstood.
Board Member Doyle, I agree that we need to move forward with this. Board Member Chin,
Member Chin agrees.
Member Joyce, agree. Member Patel, Member Barmore.
Member DeBarmore agree.
Now, if we talk about the priority, thinking about all of these SBARs that we reviewed, because they're all, you know, intertwined, if you will. So if you can bring back, yes, thank you. I'm asking for board member recommendations on where to place this.
Go ahead.
Staff Member Davis, with regard to, for me to help me understand timelines with other things in here, let's pick number one, drug shortage. Drug shortage.
Storage or shortage?
Storage, sorry. At the end of the day.
Late in the day.
With regards to drug storage, I'm making a hypothesis here, if you will. You have direction that that's number one, that you would be able to work on rules. It would come back to board for review in August.
Or October, as soon as possible, it would be our first priority.
Right. And then potentially, if it were reviewed in, let's say for the first time in October, then most likely it would probably come back for a second review as opposed to being sent for rulemaking in November. And I'm just thinking how long it's taken us to go through some of the rule package recently, and I know that that's a contentious issue. And then we could choose to make a rulemaking hearing sometime earlier than May of 2025. So when we talk about prioritizing RDSP things, the SBARs that we've just reviewed, if we place it in number one, it would have a timeline, which we sort of just outlined for drug storage. And any item or any ranking below that will have a slightly slower process with each step. So I just wanted to try and put that in context for everybody.
Staff Member Davis, I think in order to facilitate this, it would just be easier if each board member would say verbally with their name where you would slot this, like I want it to be number 4, we'll average it up, and then we'll tell you where it came out, so that we can put it in this metric.
That's what I was also in agreement with the process. So board member Chin, what number do you choose to line this out? Member Joyce? 5. Member Patel?
Member Patel 2.
Member DeBarmore?
Member DeBarmore 2.
Board member Beeman?
A 2.
Member Doyle, 5.
Hold on, I'm doing math.
Comes out to a 3.
Thank you.
So that comes into second place overall
It comes into first place over.
as a 3.
Are we missing 2 people? Yeah, there's
So I'm 5 and 5 is 10, 18, 18 divided by 6 is 3.
We only have 6 people here. We had 7 people on the
Original.
original. That's why it's different. But I would agree that a 2 seems like the appropriate spot based on the majority of board members. We're missing board member Hall. Vote for her.
Again, we had 2 votes for 5, 4 votes for 2. And so that tallies up to 18. We had 6 voters, 18 divided by 6 equals 3. And so, oh, I received, my problem is that I'm looking at the old version on my iPad and not the new one on the, got it. So, so just for confirmation from, board, to assure that we're in agreement with placing this at 2. Staff member Melvin,
Staff member Melvin, the board motioned to adopt this version that you're seeing right now, just a little while ago. So we will need to,
line that.
that's correct.
So,
Do we, or we need your help to
Okay,
figure
so
out
we're gonna
if we need to?
Item number 2, correct? List, is the second one below drug storage. So I would just have a motion to amend the list of priorities that were presented earlier in the day to slot the review of division, chapter 85, division 139 rules as the second item on that list previously of 13 is now the second item of 14 priorities. That, I think it's clear enough for the board.
So moved. Yes.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Board Vice President Doyle. Yes. Board President Doyle, yes. Board Vice President Chin,
Yes.
Member Beeman,
Yes.
Board Member DeVarmore, Board Member Joyce,
Board Member Joyce, yes.
Member Patel.
Yes.
Motion passes. Have a new number 2. Board Member Doyle, that concludes the agenda slated for today. I'm assuming that we don't want to broach any more new subjects because we have to vacate the room by 4:45. So therefore, is there a motion as we move to adjourn the meeting at 4:28 PM?
Seconded by board member Chin.
Motion second has been made. We now call roll to adjourn the meeting at 4:28. Board President Doyle, yes. Vice President Finn.
Yes.
Board Member Beeman. Board Member DeVarmore. Board Member Joyce.
Yes.
Board Member Patel.
Yes.
Motion passes. We are concluded for today's work. We'll see you tomorrow morning, Friday at 8:30.